The views and opinions on Where Did the Road Go belong to those making them. Do not mistake allowing freedom of speech for agreement. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following amazing individuals: Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And by request, tonight we're talking about this drone phenomena that's been happening all over the place. And I have with me two people I thought would be perfect for this conversation. Super Inframan.
Hello, hello.
And Red Pill Junkie.
Good evening, everybody.
I guess you guys are the Red Squad.
We're the red shirts.
I love it. I love it.
We're the ones who are going to get, eaten by the monster.
We get sacrificed first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So, Saxon, I mean, the reason I think you're perfect for this is because you have such a knowledge of aviation. You're a pilot, so on and so forth. And Red Pill, of course, you have a vast knowledge of the UFO phenomena. So I figured that's a good mix there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll lead off by saying this. I want to make a point of separating, conventional aircraft and things like that from the phenomenon. You'll hear me talk a lot about some of the images that get posted and videos that people think are anomalous, that are just conventional aircraft. But that doesn't negate anything that's going on in these places. That just means that somebody happened to also see an airplane and misidentify it.
Yeah.
Because I still think there's something going on here. And as we go through the discussion, I think especially RPJ is very good about bringing insight to that. But I just want to kind of caveat everything with that, because it may sound like all I'm doing is debunking, and that's not my intention.
Right.
No, I mean, obviously, there needs to be a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to try to analyze these unfolding events, especially because due to the attention of the press and also now the involvement of the authorities, it is conducive to hype and probably even a little bit of mass hysteria. But I want to go back to something you said, Saxon, because I think you're trying to mark a difference between what we here in this show call the phenomenon, like the truly anomalous UFO events, and conventional aircraft. So now I am curious into knowing, where do you put drones that are of unknown origin, or that the people who operate or control them have not been located?
Well, so that's kind of what fascinates me about all this. And this is kind of what's making me probably like diving down rabbit holes too much. But do y'all remember, I think it was in Colorado and maybe like somewhere in the Southwest, like Arizona or New Mexico, when they were having the random drone swarms chasing cars and things like that?
I wrote an article 4 years ago about a similar drone wave that happened first in Colorado and then it spread to Nebraska.
Okay. Yes. That's it, RPJ.
And it was similar in the sense that people were reporting what it appeared to be fixed wing drones. And here, for people, in order to try to ascertain what we're talking about, because drones is such a blanket term nowadays. It's everything from this little quadcopter toy that you can find in your local Radio Shack, to the big, almost like a regular aircraft that is only unmanned, carrying weapons that are flown on war theaters by governments like the United States and have been used in warfare for at least 30 years. So I think in the case of that particular event that happened, like I said, 4 years ago in the United States Southwest, the witnesses were reporting fixed-wing aircraft that nevertheless were able to stay flying on a certain area for many minutes, right? And this is one of the characteristics of fixed-wing drones, different from your regular quadcopters. Quadcopters, especially if they're small, they are only able to stay airborne for, let's say, an average of 20 to 30 minutes. And also that depends on the payload they may carry. But because they are battery operated, they are electrical. They don't have a gas power engine. So they are not able to stay afloat for a very long time. Not so when you have something that kind of can fly like a plane, or maybe even like one of the old RC toy planes that you used to have, like
like a good remote control airplane. That
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to figure out how we kind of draw a distinction between commercial aircraft that are flying into airports, commercially available drones, like what you're talking about that you and I can go pick up at Radio Shack or Best Buy or something like that, versus what some of these things that are being seen are. And what I'm really kind of fascinated about too, RPJ, is, the posts that I see that have images tend to look, like conventional aircraft going into land and stuff like that. Yeah. But those are not exactly the same thing that I'm seeing the written reports of things that are not lit, that were following like Coast Guard boats. I saw a couple of written accounts where someone was talking about it was at nighttime and it looked like a silvery swimming sort of like teardrop shape.
Okay.
But of course they don't have a photograph of it. And it's nighttime. I wouldn't photograph anyway because it's not lit up. And so there's lots to unpack here. Yeah. But yeah, I for the longest time when this first started coming around, one of the supporters of the show is a TDT Skunkworks. He sends a lot of AMA questions, and he and I were kind of sending messages back and forth because he was seeing the same things, or not he was seeing the same stories come up in Scotland where he is. And so he and I were like, oh, maybe this is war game. But, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the videos that one can find online are very confusing because I agree that probably the majority of them, if you care to look at them, and they're kind of like, they're frustrating because some of the people who are posting them, and many of those accounts are only trying to garner attention, right? So, oh my God, who could have built such a machine? And you see, and you take a few minutes and say, well, that's a goddamn helicopter. You're showing it's just a regular helicopter, or that could very well be an airplane, unless it is way lower, flying at a lower altitude than what a commercial aircraft should be flying. The one video that really caught my attention and said, wait a minute, this is interesting, is one that showed a machine that, for all intents and purposes, was a winged aircraft. But this video showed the aircraft like flying sideways in a way that you would feel an airplane wouldn't be able to do so. And I remember asking you guys on our channel, our private Slack channel, what do you make of this? Because maybe I am being misled by some type of optical illusion. And our friend Chris Ernst really suggested that yes, he has traveled to New Jersey many times, probably because he has family there or something, and he says that it can be a little bit deceiving seeing the planes that are going to land on the New Jersey airport, the way that they seem to land it is kind of confusing, not having never been there, and having never experienced that myself. I wouldn't be able to say if that's the case or not. But I mean, that was one video that was like, okay, it looks like a plane, but it doesn't move like a plane. And I've seen a few other videos that there's really seems to be a little more unconventional in terms of performance of these lights, and these are lights, because they are filmed at such a distance and using regular cell phones. You can't discern any type of structure, right? But the way they move drone-like. I mean, the way that we are now accustomed to see drones like moving really erratic ways in very, from moving from here to there in a really short distance. So those are the ones that really caught my attention, and also the fact that you have now the authorities running press conferences, answering questions to the press and answering questions to politicians. And when you see the FBI saying, "Yeah, we don't know what those are either," that's when it's okay, wait a minute, okay, so is this just mass hysteria? And if it is, why isn't that the FBI just comes clean and just dissuades all these people and just, lifts all these fears? Or is it just now part of the culture that you cannot say to the people, yeah, you're just too stupid between some light in the sky and a regular plane, man?
So, I've gotten kind of, this is the danger of diving into some of these topics and being aware that, it's hard to trust what the government tells you and these kinds of things. So I've even considered that some of the videos I've seen that are very straightforward commercial aircraft, not anything strange going on, that are being passed off as this, are one, they might be people trolling. But my other thought was like, what if this is intentionally muddying the water? So there might be war games going on. There might be something else happening. But then you got, because I went and looked at some of the people that posted these things on Reddit too, and a lot of them look like, they were accounts that were dormant for several years and then they suddenly revived with this. And it just makes me very suspicious too, where I'm like, okay, what if there is something strange going on and it's been seen, and now we're seeing the filling the sphere with stuff, which is not what I would normally say, but we're on the air, to, confuse everybody about what actually happened. And that way, when this, seems to just end abruptly, we'll forget about it.
I mean, the thing is that these events, this current wave of anomalous, objects, let's go with anomalous objects.
I like that.
Over New Jersey. And also the previous wave happened on the Southwest some years ago. They haven't happened in a vacuum, right? Because we've also have reports of American Navy vessels have been swarmed by other types of drones that seem to be like in some type of surveillance operation, like scanning their systems. And now the thing that fascinates me is the way in which authorities are conducting themselves in these types of cases. Like, it almost feels like the United States is the giant that doesn't know how to do when there's a gnat or a swarm of gnats blocking them. In the case of the Navy vessels, I read, I think in probably one of those web pages, probably either the debrief or another one that deals with military stuff. How the Navy personnel, they have systems that can actually take down the drones, but they don't do it because, number one, in the end, it's just too cost effective, to like, I don't know, you shoot down a missile to take down a $200 or even a $2,000 drone, and just spend $20,000, doing that. So I think there was a concern and there was a call for, okay, we need to create some type of technology that can disable them or like using some type of electromagnetic interference in order to like, take them out of the air. I mean, it's interesting how in other countries, I think in Europe, you actually have the police officers training raptors, eagles, to take down the drones, which is so fucking cool. So
it sounds like the best job ever to me. You know, I hang out with this eagle and catch drones in the sky.
Right. Imagine that in 20 years from now, instead of the K9 police unit, you have like the K Eagle police unit.
Oh my gosh, that would be the time of my life.
Right.
RPG, I don't know. Are you familiar with Alex Hollings over on Sandbox News?
No, I'm afraid not.
I bet you come across him, but he does a lot on aviation and aviation updates. He's was a former Marine, has gotten a lot of like really good awards for writing about aviation development, and it has a very critical eye too, which I always appreciate that he's not taking one side and how he kind of puts things out there. But he talked about, this sort of development of like, especially coming out of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the drone developments there, and then how cheap they are to make in places like China.
Yeah.
And this shift in potential strategy for military air power to start fielding massive amounts of drones with having a few manned aircraft, or they can be unmanned too, that are really doing the work. But instead of trying to go into another territory with stealth, you would fly in hundreds of the drones like we were talking about earlier that, have wings and things like that to totally overwhelm the response of the country. And then also using things like that almost as a net to interfere with incoming artillery or missiles and what have you. And so there is a big thought apparently around this sort of, like we were saying, swarm, I suppose, method of using drones and a desire to catch up and be ahead on it. And so, that kind of goes back to the war game side of things of like, if it's another country, it's expensive and we don't want to fool with it. But the other thought I had was, one, we're testing it on ourselves to see how we respond to it and how vulnerable we are.
Yeah,
but
that's definitely.
Yeah, but going back to your point, with if it's another bad actor or another country or however we want to portray it, if you remember, I think you and I've talked about this on the show, but back in the Area 51 days early on when they were developing the U-2, they would know when the Russian satellites would fly over. They could kind of time it. And some of the guys out there would take, because the Russian satellites had an infrared camera on them, they would take a kind of like a mini blowtorch type device. There's a little backpack thing, and they would go outline the shape of like crazy airplanes on the runway. So when the satellite would go over, it would think that there was an unknown airplane being tested out there.
Yeah.
And so, if these are, I don't know if this is the case in New Jersey, but, if they're swarming naval ships and things like that, if they're coming, do you take that opportunity to mislead as opposed to spending the money to shooting them down?
Yeah, it's a good question. Exactly. Because it becomes so complex. Like, I don't know. I was thinking the other day. It's been 3 years since the war in Ukraine started.
Right.
And the way that United States and NATO has acted after, all these years of Russia trying to like invade this sovereign country, like leads me to believe that the United States is never going to go with the nuclear option, right? They are the ones who have the most to lose. Yeah, like even if China, even if we're tomorrow, Xi Jinping were to say, yeah, those are our drones. What are you going to do about it? Huh? What are you going to do? And the United States would just foam and rage. They're not going to declare war on China.
Yeah.
They're not going to declare war on China because that what escalates to nuclear war, and who has the most to lose?
Yeah.
No? So they will try to use other methods, the methods that they have been using for the last, 30 years since the Cold War, ended, quote unquote, and then started once again unannounced, of using other kind of diversions and obfuscations and shenanigans, not to mention all the economic angles in which they're trying to mess up with China. But then China obviously has the upper hand because China has an army of hackers, that can wage cyber war on the United States. So I don't know. It is fascinating. Like I don't have an answer. I'm just talking here out of my behind. But listening how there is this, I don't know the name of this American politician claiming that these drones come from the sea, because apparently there are reports, people saying that they have come from the shore or from the coastline, I guess, and according to this guy, they are Iranians. Like what? I mean, it's on one hand, I think that's the best publicity you could give to Iran.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And on the other hand, I don't know, then okay, what's your next move? You're going to go and wage war on Iran again? You're going to go and another war on the Middle East when everybody's tired? You don't have the money. Americans don't have the money for another war.
No, I thought about that, and I don't have an answer either. But as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, Iran could really be doing this with Chinese drones, or we could have staged this to say Iran was doing this with Chinese drones.
Okay, like a false flag operation?
Yeah, it's like weapons of mass destruction. Somebody's got them. But that crossed my mind. I was like, well, nothing's being hurt. You could say it was theirs, that kind of thing. But then, it was interesting that after that New Jersey congressman said that, 2 hours later, the Pentagon had a spokeswoman come out saying they don't know what this is. And then today, the White House, John Kirby, one of their press secretaries, was saying, we don't know what this is. It doesn't seem to be a threat, and we can't corroborate anything. But, those, again, are all the things that kind of make me think firsthand it might be war games.
Yeah.
Right.
But it also adds a lot to what you're saying, RPJ, because if it was China, are we going to go to war with China? Probably not.
No.
Everything in every retail store in the United States that we need every day, and I'm saying that, air quotes, most of it's made in China.
Yes.
Most of China's economic prosperity comes from us paying them to make the stuff we use every day. They keep their money artificially devalued.
Right.
I mean, it's fascinating how all this works. And obviously, we're not best friends, but I always sort of, when I see some of the saber rattling around it, I'm like, yeah, but do either of us want to give up the perceived comforts that we have? Because we're attached to them.
So we're talking about nation states being too big and too in bed with each other to start anything nefarious, proclaim war, and let the world go with a blast. So obviously that leaves other alternatives like terrorist groups, terrorist organizations. Obviously here in Mexico, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this. The cartels have really embraced drone technology, not only for things like surveillance or even things like actually trying to drop their merchandise across the American border using drone technology, but also for offensive tactics, trying to scare populations or to attack their adversaries. Obviously for them, these drones are a dime a dozen, and then they arm them with explosive payloads. Similar to what is happening in the Ukrainian war,
Right.
So we're definitely seeing a lot of that here in Mexico. But obviously in the United States, nobody has actually complained of having been hurt by one of these drones. I mean, at the least, they're just being harassed and say, well, these damn things, they're just passing every time and they make a lot of noise and they're making everybody nervous in the neighborhood. But that's about it.
Right.
And that's why people like 4 years ago in Colorado and Nebraska, they were thinking, well, maybe there's some kind of company, maybe there's some kind of like private group that is doing some type of like land prospecting, looking for minerals, oil, and such. But then that was like the concern is like, okay, so what is the government going to do about it? Because supposedly the FAA has to enforce the regulation of drones hovering over inhabited areas, and also like what times of day they have to operate. And here, even in this current wave, I think that one of the concerns is that the drones were either trespassing or about to trespass this golf court property of Donald Trump that supposedly is off limits for aerial navigation. So that, which is interesting because that kind of reminded me of what happened. You guys remember the famous Stephenville UFO wave of 2008? And a similar thing happened in that case, in which the aerial objects were about to trespass the restricted area, which was the ranch of then President George W. Bush.
Ah, okay.
So I'm not saying, it's a similarity, but at least to me, that was an interesting link.
Well, it is, because it does say there's a self-awareness of like restricted airspace, and kind of walking up to the line and not crossing it,
Right, exactly. What happened with this guy who shot the CEO of the healthcare insurance company, right? This manhunt to catch the guy, because why? Because obviously it's attacking this member of the elite, this rich guy.
Right.
We can have none of that. If it had been just a regular, poor immigrant guy, I'm sure the guy will still be at large.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. People get murdered every day.
Yeah. I was having the discussion with some friends about that, and I'm like, they asked me if I would want, this same kind of effort made for if something happened to my mom, and I was like, I would want this kind of effort made for anybody.
Yeah.
But the problem is it's not, and only if they're of a certain status do you get this kind of effort made for you.
Yep.
And I was like, that's the problem. That's wrong, because that's not justice. It's interesting. And then, this was something I wanted to run past you. Someone on Blue Sky, instead of posing it as a potential terrorist organization, wondered if it was one of these billionaire types that's trying to build their own little personal armies.
Could be.
And I hadn't considered that, but that's kind of chilling.
That is interesting, yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if it's just our tech and they're seeing how our, like from a black project, and they're testing to see how we respond to it and how the public responds to it. Because that is what they do. And who knows how advanced this tech is. I mean, if you really wanted to get drones into an area unseen, you wouldn't fill them with lights.
Right.
Obviously, these are meant to be seen. They're meant to make a spectacle. And there was the one that was very large that I kept hearing about. It was the size of like a small car.
Yeah. And the thing with just like airplanes too, you can turn all the lights on and off, right? But you're having instances where the lights are on, and the ones that are like the size of a car, I dropped that little personal transport in our Slack. I can't remember the name of it, but there is a commercially available, essentially something like it would be the drone equivalent of a quad bike or an ATV or a four-wheeler that you can sit in the middle of, and it has a little cage around it and four substantial rotors, and you can fly that thing around. But it's just like RPJ was saying earlier, because of the payload and things like that, it can't go very far for very long because the battery's going to die.
Right.
But if this is government stuff and you've got something larger, I can imagine they've got a different way of storing power than we do.
Well, that's the thing. What kind of batteries do some of these people maybe have out there that they haven't released commercially?
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, this reminds me. I don't know if you guys even paid attention to the senatorial hearing that occurred. I want to say like 3 weeks ago with the now current head of ARROW, the government UFO office.
No.
Okay.
Okay. I watched some of it, but I didn't see this one, RPJ.
Okay, so obviously it was interesting, and this is something that I discussed with our friend Tim Binal 2 days ago. Like, it's such a cognitive dissonance how you have like the crazy UFO hearing, with the guy staring, Roswell is real, and we have UFOs on some basement and dealings with the aliens and yada yada yada. And you have the other ones in which like almost like the voice of reason that nobody pays attention to, like was totally like the room was almost empty, which was kind of hilarious. You could see just, I don't remember the name of the current director of ARROW. And you could see him, and you could see what some people say is Susan Goff, like this Pentagon spokesperson, like the now everybody's favorite villain, because she's the one who always is like disclaiming all the claims of Luel Elizondo and such. And Susan Goff was like giving him like the evil, controversial, don't tell them that there are actually cases that are truly anomalous. Because one of the cases that this guy mentioned to Senator Gillibrand was one in which I think it was some kind of like deputy officer was chasing. I think at first it was an orange orb, and then when he moved to where he thought the orb had landed or something, he observed, I'm paraphrasing here, like I just watched that video once, but I think he observed something he described as being blacker than black, the size of a car, and then this object like floated away from him. So now what is now currently happening, I'm wondering, was that one of those car-sized drones?
It sure seems like it, doesn't it? Wow.
But we also, and we also have to add into this that we know that whatever the UFO phenomena is, it tends to mimic or be just ahead of our technology. So how do we know, which is which when people are having these sightings? Because we don't really know what tech is out there. But also, if this stuff mimics the tech that's out there, like how do we even begin to detangle one from the other?
Yeah,
I mean, that is another interesting point you're raising, Soraya, because, I mean, from the point of view of, from a sociological point of view, it's interesting to see the public reaction to these kind of events, depending on how strange they seem to be or how anomalous they seem to be. Like in that article that I keep mentioning, I try to compare that previous drone wave of 4 years ago with the airship wave that happened in the 1890s in the same area of the United States. And what's interesting is that obviously back then, no one was talking about like invaders from outer space, or obviously nobody was talking about invaders from China. They were considering this anomaly, this phenomenon. Obviously, if you give credence to these sightings, which I think that some of them, not all of them, but some of them probably were genuine. But the reaction of people were like, okay, they were seeing this phenomenon and they were thinking that it was some kind of like new invention. I mean, after all, they were living in this new age in which things were invented at a faster rate, new things, new miracles through science. And they were thinking, well, obviously this airship has to be this new invention from some kind of like private inventor, because obviously back in those days, it wasn't the government, right? The ones that were bringing these miracles to fruition. It was some kind of like private inventors, some type of Edison type, or if you go with the Jules Verne's type of fiction literature, a Captain Nemo guy who invented something on their own, concealed from the light of public. And they thought, well, they're testing their invention, and sooner or later it will come to light, and this person will become, a millionaire once they manage to land the patent or whatnot. Obviously, that never happened. And now we have this, obviously, we now live in an age in which if you go to your neighbors and say, hey, man, I saw a UFO right now, like a few minutes ago, and say, dude, have you been drinking?
Yeah.
Are you talking or what, bro? But if you go and say, hey, man, there's like a drone, like a patrol in the neighborhood, they say, oh my God, man, call the police. So there is that difference in the reaction, even though the drone is still an anomaly, because nobody knows where the drone comes from, nobody knows who operates them, and more importantly, nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So there's still the concern, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's interesting to see how people feel more permitted to raise the alarms or call the authorities when they see a drone. Whereas if there was something like was truly anomalous, like a bona fide flying saucer, maybe people wouldn't be as ready to call their local police station.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And it makes it so, because you can report drones, comfortably, you don't feel the same social pressure. But, we have so many things that we could surmise that it might be and still have no idea if we're correct or not. It makes digging through these topics really, really hard.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, is it? And here's the other thing. If everybody's seeing stuff, say there wasn't anything anomalous, just hypothetically, but now that they think they're seeing things that are anomalous, well, could you not just start manifesting when there's, hundreds of thousands of people in New Jersey that think there's drones flying over? You're going to see drones. I mean, it's going to happen. Then, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was going to say, a friend of mine sent me a link that was clearly it was the line of what looked like the Starlink satellites.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Starlink, because they look like a chain going across the sky. Mm-hmm. There was also another one he sent me that turned out to be a picture of Venus. Not ironically, since that's the whole, you just saw Venus.
Funny, I say.
But when I was coming out of Rochester one day, I was heading south out of Rochester, and it goes along the area by the airport out there, and there was a really bright light in the sky, and I'm sure that's a plane. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I'm going to stop for a minute because I had to do something anyway, and then I took my camera out, and I got out of the car, and just my phone camera, and I zoomed in on the light and took a picture, and what I got was a square.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that's weird. I'm still sure that's a plane, but why does it look like a square? And it's just the digital zoom is pixelating the light. It can't pick up that kind of detail at that distance. And once the thing flew over, I took a picture of it and actually sent it to Sex. And I'm like, this is what a plane looks like, just verifying. And he's like, yeah, that's this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, interesting, because you look at that first picture, and I could have put that up and be like, what did I just take a picture of? It's square,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, later on, though, you sent me some videos that where it was in the Slack that, I couldn't tell what it was. And that's just like we were talking earlier when Chris was talking to us about the airports out there, especially large aircraft. If they're coming towards you or away from you, they can almost look like they're just floating in place.
Yeah. And that's what this did, which is why I decided I was going to just try to take a picture and see what the picture looked like,
Yeah. And the lights on those, especially larger aircraft, they are so incredibly bright. You're seeing them from miles and miles away. And, when you look at a light like that, you have a hard time getting depth perception on it because you're getting, light straight into your eyes. So it's not like it's bouncing off things. So it's a little harder to gauge distance. So, when you have some of those in sequence coming in, like the airport that I helped run, when I had gotten there, they had already had a contract to provide fuel for military aircraft coming through. And every once in a while, the big carrier planes, not the C-130, it's a different one, but that same size would come through and do touch and goes where they would just, land on the runway, go down the runway, and then take off and keep going. But when you would see those come in, it looked like a building hanging in the sky because they were so big.
Yeah.
But also because they were so big, they could actually fly quite slow as they were coming in because they had so much lift. And it was, almost not nauseating, but it would feel weird because it just didn't look right. But you have that, right? And then you have like what we're talking about earlier with, I love Kill has a great paragraph about anomalous aircraft appearing around flap areas. And, is this a conventional thing? Is it military? Is it civilian? Is it something else? Is it the byproduct of something anomalous happening? It's really hard to sort through all of this. And I worry, with what RPJ was bringing up, because we're confident talking about drones, even though we don't know what it is, that it's going to be so much harder to sift through these things to have an idea of if something's anomalous or unknown or misidentified, maybe all the above, maybe none of the above.
I want to share with you guys something that Greg Taylor and I recently discussed with none other than Jacques Vallée.
Okay.
We had the pleasure and opportunity to interview him a couple of weeks ago, and the interview is already available for free on our YouTube channel, on our Daily Grail YouTube channel, which I highly recommend. And one of the things that I wanted to ask him is something that I found in his Forbidden Science journals, in which he discussed the famous Belgian triangles.
Oh, yeah.
The UFO wave that happened in the late 1980s, early 1990s. I don't know if you guys remember. I'm sure you guys remember that Unsolved Mysteries episode in which they portrayed that UFO event. It was so dramatic because they show. It starts with those guys, police officers in their police car, and then they stop and they see this giant triangle craft like hovering over these little. Village, right? With their three white lights in each angle, in each vertex, and then the red one right in the middle, right? And then I wanted to ask this to Vallée because, in his opinion, in these journals, he was wondering if these were actually a test of some type of classified aerial vehicle. And I'm bringing this up right now because one of the things that he told us is that, number one, that the people who conducted investigations on this came to the conclusion that these objects were not really that big, where they were apparently no bigger than a car or maybe a lorry, like a truck.
Oh, okay.
So that was, to me, a surprise and even a little bit disappointment, because I was thinking, oh my God, these things were giant. No, they were not that giant. And actually, he said that one of those was able to be tracked by the French aerospace agency. And they managed to see that one of them landed in French territory. So they went and investigated, and actually they apparently managed to retrieve traces. And they came to the conclusion that it was some type of man-made vehicle. But get this, these were sort of like a blimp, but not the typical blimp with a soft exterior. It was this apparently had some kind of hard casing.
Yes.
But nevertheless, they managed that it was lighter than aircraft. It is what allowed them to perform these maneuvers of hovering over areas as reported by the witnesses. And then he said that probably these were tests conducted by someone of craft that were probably then used over at the Middle East once the first Iraqi war started. Not so much for offensive purposes, but more some sort of information relay. Maybe these were types. The things that, remember how now Google tried to create this type of Google balloon. Balloon. Were told they were going to be used in order to bring internet access to very remote areas. maybe it was something like that.
Yeah. There were a few years ago, you and I talked about this on the show too. I think RPG. I know we were talking about another drone that you could shoot a laser at, maybe, and it would like charge it, but. Using that sort of like, it's a movable satellite sort of method where you have that balloon or that airship or whatever, and it loiters over an area, and it's a relay or reconnaissance type thing. And I think actually it was Greg Bishop was on one time, and we were talking about the black triangles, and we didn't know the part about the size, but if you had something like that of the right size, and now that we know we can make smaller nuclear reactors, would you make that and put something, with a nuclear power into it, power source, then it could stay in the sky for an extreme amount of time, and you wouldn't have to ever refuel the thing.
Right, but then you get into the, for example, the cash landrum type of history, right?
Yeah.
In which you have this event, which I'm quite certain that is a real case of these individuals, Iki Landrum, Betty Cash, I think I'm saying their names correctly, and their grandson of one of them, and they were affected by this object that was hovering on the road near to them, and they suffered greatly from what, for all intents and purposes, was radiation, right?
Yeah,
right? Radiation poisoning. And then you have some nefarious individuals who should never be trusted, Richard Doty, who went to tell people like our friend Greg Bishops that was an actual test of a classified secret aircraft using some type of nuclear propulsion. And the way that it was constructed, this aircraft it was shielded in such a way to protect the pilots,
right?
That they didn't even have windows. They had to be controlled everything electronically, and for some reason they actually lost control, so they lost direction. They didn't know where they were, and that's why they were so close to these witnesses, and then they were managed to be taken out of that place through these military helicopters who were a part of the story. But the point is, number one, obviously nobody should trust anything that Richard Doty said.
Right.
Number two, and now we're talking about drone technology, you think that if you are going to have a nuclear type of aircraft, why put human pilots in danger? Just
you don't have
make
to
it a drone. Exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously, then it still comes the argument: why test it on inhabited, areas? Where there could be always some type of accident, and then you have all these, downpour of radioactive material, that will create all sorts of havoc.
Yeah,
but also,
I wonder too at this point, like if you have something that can stay that high,
right?
Then you could probably have it solar powered as well. If I remember, and I may just be making this up, but there was some talk around, when it was in Europe, the triangle sightings, like sometimes they would find it over small ponds and things, pulling water into itself.
Yes.
Yeah. And so in my mind, that was kind of reinforcing the nuclear part, but that could also just be other ways of cooling, motors or something. If that actually happens.
Interesting. Yeah.
Real quick, Soraya, and I'll be quiet, but the debrief, there was an article, I'll see if I can find it, from probably 3 years ago about triangle and V-shaped balloons. And they show this really large V-shaped blue balloon, and they talked to the CEO of that company in the article, and he is really smart and careful to say, because they bring up like the Phoenix lights and some other things like that.
Oh yeah, the Daily Grail also wrote an article about that.
Yeah. And so I bet you'll remember this guy, but anyway, he very candidly said, those are not ours, but I can't tell you that they're not one of our competitors. It was a really interesting thing, and they were using this V-shaped balloon to raise payloads up to very high altitude with the intention of firing it off like a rocket, the payload, to get it into space. But you've already covered, quite a bit of distance getting it off the ground, so it would be more cost effective. But yeah, it was interesting. The way he phrased it was a very, I can't tell you it's what it is, but I can be very blatant about telling you, there are triangle balloons that aren't from my company.
Right.
Well,
okay, sorry, Rod.
No, that's okay. You had mentioned you can't trust Doty, but that doesn't mean everything Doty says is a lie either. That's the problem.
That's the problem. Exactly. It's a minefield.
And that comes, was it the day or date? It's either the day or 2 days after the incident in the UK. Why am I not remembering?
Rendlesham.
Yeah, Rendlesham.
Yeah.
And I think it was, names are not coming to me right now. Nick Redford put out, Redford, I think I said Redford. Redford pointed out that the objects were actually similarly described between the Cash Landrum and the other one.
Oh.
Well, if anything, I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure that the object is described by the patrol guards.
Yeah.
The guys who have suffered from proximity to the object. The names escape me, but they described an object that was car shaped, or car sized. I guess what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, to me, that's interesting how we are returning back to these objects that are not really that large. And to be fair, in the history of ufology, most of the objects described as witnesses are really not that big, it's really rare to see people say, "Oh my God, it was as big as a football stadium." That's one of a measure that you Americans love so much.
Well,
but really, in most of the cases, the objects are small, car sized.
The UFO I saw over Cayuga Lake back in 2000 or 2001, whatever it was, looked enormous. And it looked enormous because I could see that it dropped down toward the lake behind trees that were way down, by the lake, which meant this thing was huge. But I don't know that there was any structure there. That's the thing.
Right.
I couldn't see a structure. I could just see the lights.
The light, yeah.
So these lights, even though they were in a formation, do not mean that they were attached to any kind of structure behind that. It certainly gave that impression, but that was one of the things I noted. I'm like, I can't actually see a structure because the lights are too bright. So you could just have a formation of lights, none of which are that big, but are taking up a large area, giving the impression of a large object.
And obviously, I mean, getting back to the drone discussion, we've all have seen all these videos which are quite impressive. Like 20 years ago, I would have been quite flabbergasted by these aerial displays coming out of China and Europe and other places in which they use these small quadcopter drones in swarm formation, and they manage to operate them in unison to create these displays that, I mean, they can build anything, in the sky using the drones almost like light pixels, so they can create, they can create dragons, they can create spheres or a rotating planet. It's quite amazing. So it is really, it's messier. It's going to be really difficult nowadays to try to ascertain what is a true UFO, a truthful, as Ismail Lewis calls them, from just a regular drone. And maybe that's by design, Maybe that's something that is going to be used by the phenomenon, as you, Soraya, are suggesting,
So to add to that, if we're entering this different phase of the way countries spy on each other, maybe that's part of the reason of the vernacular change from UFO to UAP and things like that. So the public is more likely report these things. Because, you know, the other thing, like I saved an article today where they were going to send some specialized radars to New Jersey to try and track, you know, these drones, because there's different levels of radar precision. And I'm no expert on this, y'all, but a general aviation air traffic control radar, like it can't tell everything that it sees. That's why we all have transponders in commercial aircraft.
Right.
And those send out a specific number. They'll give you a 4-digit number to put in before you take off if you're using flight following, which means I'm staying in touch with the towers. And that way, when the radar return goes over our plane, it'll flash that number. So they know that return is, you know, the three of us in 172 and we're flying to go see Tim Renner. You know, that kind of thing. But a flock of birds will send a return back.
Right.
Pockets of moisture in the sky will send a return back. I think I said in the Slack, it may have been on Blue Sky. I can't remember. I've been hitting the head too many times. I was flying a little Beechcraft Sundowner to go see my mom, and the area control Fort Worth Center called me and said, hey, we've got traffic coming towards you, 200 feet below your altitude, from 230. Can you verify there's anything out there? And there was a group of hang gliders flying below me. And they were quite high. I mean, I was about a little over a mile high, but they were up there and they flew under me. But, that's the thing. Like, they don't have ADS-B transponder stuff going on or anything like that. And the radar could kind of see them, but it's also because there was a group of them. So, if we're talking car-sized drones or smaller, it's going to be hard to even tell what they are. So, if they're sending something that's more specialized out that can track these smaller things, hopefully that will help some. But you still, even if it's sending returns back, how do you know that's a drone? And, you've got to look at what it's doing, because otherwise it might just be a really big bird flying fast or something.
I mean, to me, that what's interesting about all this, is that goes to show how technology has superseded governments.
Yeah.
Like
Or
no
at least the
government
public
in the
face.
world is able. Yeah, no government in the world is able to control the drone technology.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to. But they're too slow, and they put all these regulations that even aficionados they don't pay heed to, and obviously people who are not playing by the rules of the governments, they wouldn't do so either. So it's fascinating. You think about it. Drones can take down a government if they chose to. It's happening right now in Ukraine and Russia. If Ukraine had their drone technology like tenfold, they probably could invade Russia.
Yeah,
and the other way around. So it's interesting. And then if we go and combine drone technology with AI, it's even worse, because there's no government in the world that is even attempting to put a restraint on AI development.
True.
Nobody is trying to do so. Like I was telling that to a family member the other day, that if I were to put on social media, like, hey, I'm building a dirty nuclear bomb on my garage, haha, as a joke, like, I'm sure that the next day somebody will be knocking on my door. There will be like at least a few patrol cars saying, what the hell are you doing? But if I'm instead of writing that, I'm saying, I'm developing this new AI technology that is out of this world, I will probably just get like, oh, cool, bro. Like, good on you.
Yeah.
And AI technology in many regards is even more pernicious, more dangerous than nuclear technology.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick break here. Contact info and a recommendation. Contact, as always, can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com. All our social media links are there, and if you go to the info section, you can find contact emails. There's even a little pop-up you can message me directly from the website on. Also, all the shows, all the way back to the very first one, are available there. And you can also become a Patreon, and it's only $3 a month. And get you extra stuff all month long. The show's a week or two early, no commercials, etc., etc. It's a lot of stuff for just $3 a month. So if you like the show, help us out, become a Patreon, and it does indeed help out a lot. As for a recommendation, I struggled on this one. I haven't seen or heard anything particularly new and interesting lately. So I was looking back through some podcasts that I listened to in the past, and I found The Far Meridian. And that's Meridian. It was on the Whisperforge network. If I remember right, it starts out really, really good. It's not horror or anything like that. It's just very weird. And at some point, I think near the end of the second season, I lost interest in it. I don't remember why. But at least the beginning of it is, it has a great atmosphere. It's weird, and I know I enjoyed it in the beginning, so I'm going to recommend it. The Far Meridian, and I could be wrong. The whole thing could be good. I just don't remember because it's been a few years since I listened to it. But, yeah. So check it out if you're interested, and back to the show. You're listening to Where Did the Road Go? And apparently we're now talking about AI. And I think the misuse of AI is the more dangerous thing about AI than anything else. That we feel like we can just rely on it, and it's very wrong most of the time.
But with tying this back into the New Jersey stuff, say you've got the term mothership was used by the congressman, and I think that may have been a little bit of a. People took that a little too sci-fi, but say you've got a, car size one that docks, 20 or 10, drones that are 2 foot across. And that's an AI platform, and it knows the parameters of what it can do to avoid being detected. And it is very adamant of keeping everything operating within that range, staying below radar, moving at certain speeds, never breaking those speeds, what have you. A scary thought. And I could totally see that being a thing.
Yeah, but we've all seen videos developed by DARPA, from 10 years ago, showing that type of concept. Doesn't mean they actually managed to develop it, but that means that they were paying attention and they wanted to. Like the idea of having, like a mothership, like a big platform that is housing a swarm of tiny other, robotic drones that will operate in tandem, and they will manage to deploy them at a given area for whatever reason, probably most of them surveillance, but like we're saying, it could also be used as an offensive system if you put a tiny explosive payload in each one of them.
Yeah. It'd be like an aircraft carrier for drones.
Yeah.
This is something that we know that governments want to develop. The question obviously is, has someone already done so?
Well, so you probably saw this. I bet y'all have seen it. There was a video going around maybe a month ago of, these drones that were like the size of a wasp that had a tiny, tiny explosive in it. And it would fly directly up to somebody's forehead. Yes.
Wow.
It could identify the person, and then it would explode right as it got to the forehead. And so, it was an assassination drone.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you imagine, having some of those, and who it's looking for. We've got facial recognition software now and things like that. And you have a general idea of where they are.
Right.
And they're not going to fly for very long or very far because their battery's small, but you have your bigger unit that gets closer and deploys those guys.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
We also can't discount the fact that maybe they are aliens and they're just really small aliens.
They could be.
They're not necessarily going to be our size. Maybe there are aliens piloting some of these things. They're just really small aliens. What's the Hitchhiker's Guide joke? The aliens travel all here to declare war and get eaten by a dog.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've all read about all those wonderful cases from, I think it was Malaysia, in which school children reported, tiny UFOs landing and some tiny alien came out, and I think he was even carrying some kind of like space gun. And there are other cases that I'm always been fascinated about those kids in Japan that found some kind of like small silvery disc that they took home, and it was like at first they thought, well, this thing doesn't work anymore, but then the thing like almost like came to life once again, and they tried to escape and they tried to retain it. But I mean, the thing that fascinates me about it is that the objects seemed so unassuming. Like it didn't like show any kind of like incredible technology. Like one of the kids tries to open it and it explodes the whole neighborhood because it was atomic or something. No, it had that like they tried to shake it and it sounded like they had something inside of it, and it also had some weird markings in it, and the story was almost reminded me of that movie by Steven Spielberg, Batteries Not Included, the story of these little small UFOs that go into this Brooklyn brownstone because they need to get a place so they can nest and have more children, and they, in order to reproduce, they have to steal little parts from people, and that's why you lose your left sock because some alien needs it, in order to get their offspring, their little alien nest. I don't know. I guess I don't know. My point is it's interesting that we're always thinking of the UFO phenomenon in our terms, anthropocentric terms.
Yes.
If we want to see the craft that is piloted by a human-sized human, even if it is a tiny human, it doesn't matter. But like you say, Saraya, what if it's a tiny, craft piloted by a tiny entity, or what if the entity is, alive in some sense? Nowadays, all these people in the UFO field, the new bigger voices like Avi Loeb are so keen on the idea of artificial intelligence. They think, if the aliens are going to visit a planet, they're going to deploy the probes.
Right.
Like from a giant Oumuamua type of mothership. And once the giant mothership approaches the orbit of the target planet, they're going to deploy this swarm of drones, which will be the type of silvery spheres that everybody's talking about. Even when they have these hearings, Sean Kirkpatrick say, well, this is like a video from, I think it was Mosul or something, and you see this object which is kind of freaky, and say, well, we don't know what it is, and kind of wondering, maybe some kind of balloon, but nevertheless, you see this sphere moving alongside a neighborhood, then you say, oh my God, what the hell is that? And I guess nowadays we have imprinted that idea that, if we're going to see like a alien object in the sky, it's probably going to be a small type of silvery spherical probe instead of like the giant mothership.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of AI, I think the anticipation of what AI is going to be is going to be a major disappointment for most people. I had a computer client who just bought a new laptop, and the guy who sold it to him at like Staples or whatever was like, well, in a year it's going to be outdated because everything's going to be AI, and it's not going to be powerful enough to run it, and without AI you're not going to have anything. And it's like, I don't think we're anywhere close to that yet.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely going to be different than what we anticipate because, a lot of AI is basically just predicting most likely what's to come next.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Based off how it's trained. And so it's not thinking.
No.
But I think you will see some things that do benefit from it. I'm curious how it's going to affect like doing medical procedures that are still performed by a human being, but just keeping things precise.
Yeah.
Minimal amount. Those things I'm looking forward to. But the rest of the stuff I'm like
going through mass amounts of data. Things like that. Yeah, no, it's great for that stuff.
I've enjoyed using it for translation. We've got some letters from my wife's great grandfather that are all in Dutch.
Oh.
And they're handwritten, and I photographed them and threw them into, ChatGPT and asked them to translate them. And it did a pretty good job, and so it was kind of fun that way because, there's no way we could read them otherwise.
Right.
So those are the things I'm like, okay, this is cool. But the rest of it, I'm like, this kind of feels like a con.
Yes.
And the problem is that translation job probably like sucked up the amount of a whole lake.
You're right. You're absolutely right about that.
And that was the other point I was going to make. This stuff uses so much power.
And
it's
water.
And they're talking about like reopening nuclear plants, like I think the 3 Mile Island one, just to power AI. It's like, hang on here.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing that's awful about this. I know what y'all are talking about. And when I did the translation, because it's so innocuous, didn't even cross my mind to think about.
No, it doesn't.
I'm very aware, of AI imagery. There was even some stuff circulating around today that was a complete, featurette of early man that was all AI generated, and it looked like someone went and filmed people, acting out this mini story. And, that's pretty disgusting to me that we're doing those things and just we've taken everybody's copyrighted work and personal work and tried to say that we, the companies that are creating these AI things, it's too important that they compensate the people that have, they've used their art to train their devices or their programs.
Well, I know Adobe sent out a letter at some point because I have the Adobe suite, and they said, all their stuff is trained on either stuff they have the rights to or stock imagery that is publicly available. And I went, all right, that seems reasonable if that's true. I know Unleash the Archers got a lot of heat because they made a music video, which, as they put it, was not something they could have afforded to do without AI. And they had an artist design everything. But apparently when it went into the video process, the AI that did the video not only took this guy's art, but used other art out there. It like just kind of scraped stuff off the internet to fill it out.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize it was going to do that. So they thought they were doing it the right way by, having an artist design all the stuff, but since it's a sci-fi themed thing, it would have been exorbitantly expensive to film. And instead they said, okay, we'll have it animate the art that he drew. But then again, it started pulling from other people's stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons of why I stopped sharing artwork on former Twitter is because, these policies stating that by January 2025, everything you put there is free for them in order to use to train their AI algorithm, Grok.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you think that you own my work, then F you, Elon. It's disgusting, it's worrisome, it's and even more worrisome when you read books like Diana Pasulka's Encounters, because you realize there are people in Silicon Valley who are utterly convinced that AI is some type of actual alien intelligence that they need to help them to manifest into our world in order to help us elevate, to the next phase of evolution, like something to that effect, which to me is utterly disgusting.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're like, what the hell are you trying to do? You're telling me that you need to like sacrifice the livelihoods and the happiness of billions of people so you can just have a chat with your little alien friend. What do you have? A chat with someone in Africa, maybe you'll have a better time.
Or just, meditate.
Or just meditate, So meditate in something other than trying to like raise the price of your stock.
Yeah. So it was interesting because all this stuff was happening right around the time that Jeremy Vaeni put up the episodes of Paratopia, where they're talking about the Dragonfly drones back in 2012.
Ooh, the correct drones,
Yeah. Which, Jeff Ritzman is like, those pictures are fake. And he outlines exactly why they're fake. Because, I mean, he did photo analysis, and he's like, no, they were absolutely fake. It was very obvious. But then, Whitley Strieber saw one. And then Jeff admitted that prior to all these photos, a few years earlier, he saw something similar.
Huh.
And he's like, this is before I saw these pictures. He's like, and I'm telling you, those pictures are fake, but what I saw wasn't. And he goes, and as far as Whitley goes, I don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible that because Whitley believed these were real, these pictures, that, whatever manifested was because he believed those pictures were real.
Right.
But the weird thing was with Whitley's sighting, which wasn't the case with other people who were giving Linda Moulton Howe these cases. Whitley apparently could see it. He was looking out his window and saw it, and Anne came over and couldn't see it. And he pulled Anne over to where he was standing, and then she could see it, which is something that Jeff Ritzman talked about with him and Jeremy had an experience with a green light while they were waiting at the bus station, which is a fascinating story. But also Jeff was with his wife in a park one day, and he was just laying on the grass staring up, and he sees this silver sphere appear. And he asked his wife, "Do you see that?" And she said no, and he pulled her over to where she was, or to where he was, and then she could see it too.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that even John Keel speculated about in his Eighth Tower book. The idea that the proximity of a psychically sensitive individual in a group will influence the perception of the people surrounding them, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if there is a UFO in the vicinity and there is a psychic individual there, maybe there is more of a chance of the people in the proximity of that psychic guy, of the psychic individual, to actually perceive the appearance of that UFO event.
Well, it's also possible that it's dimensional in such a way that you're almost looking through a peephole. And that's kind of the way I took it. I mean, because Jeremy and Jeff were both seeing the light, but they could only see it from a certain position.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because that also seems very holographic to me, too.
Yeah.
Well, it was before we started recording, I was watching an interview with a guy on the New Thinking Aloud channel, a guy who wrote a book about the famous Marian apparitions in Zaytun, Cairo in 1968, which is an event that, to me, it's totally fascinating because there are a lot of really, really interesting photographs from those. You can find them on the internet. You can see like what seems to be a three-dimensional apparition that looks like a female clothed entity, but made out of light. And then there are other photographs that seem like orbs that transform into what seems to be like doves. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and this is something that was reported by people, and not to mention the fact that, Egypt is not a Christian country. It's a mostly Muslim country, but they have a population that are Coptic Christians. So, and this apparition was seen on top of a Coptic church. So this guy was talking about how some of the witnesses were able to see distinct facial features on the apparition, that looked like an actual woman. Whereas others were saying, no, there was just a distinct, indistinct blob of light, So the guy is wondering, is that a matter of visual acuity, of proximity to the place of the apparition, or is something else going on? And that's when we're talking about perception and what we could call paraperception, perception that occurs beyond the five senses of our bodies.
Well, and if I'm remembering right, Greg Little said that every time that apparition was appearing, there was an earthquake within 200 miles.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Which, you got to wonder because he's looking at it as these things being plasma oriented. And of course, you get plasma releases during earthquakes.
Yeah.
So maybe these things are using that energy to manifest.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the guy in this interview also mentioned the work of Michael Persinger, who actually wrote a book or a paper in trying to explain these apparitions, and he used his famous idea of the earth lights and saying that they were the result of tectonic activity. But then it is
Was
an
that-
interesting theory, but it doesn't really work, because then you would have seen similar phenomena happening all around Egypt, not just
Yeah.
on top of this one particular church in Cairo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Persinger or was that Devereaux?
Oh yeah, Devereaux, sorry.
Okay.
Or no, I think it was Persinger.
Was it
because
Persinger?
I think it was Persinger because he also, this guy was also talking about the gold helmet.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we are out of time, but want to tell people where they can find you, Red Pill?
They can find me in Mexico.
Oh, all right.
They come here. No, but they can also find me online. They can find me at the Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com, and they can also find me at my personal website, absurdbydesign.com. And next year, I'm working with Michael M. Hughes on this project of his. He's developing this role-playing game, Rockers and Rollers.
Oh, cool.
And there's soon going to be a crowdsourcing campaign in order to fund this game. And I'm going to develop the artwork for it. And
Nice.
It looks like a really fun endeavor. So, hopefully we'll be able to, maybe even me or maybe Michael, maybe the two of us, we'll be able to come here on Where Did the Road Go to talk more about it.
Absolutely.
And to invite people to support it.
And where can
Go ahead, sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
I was actually going to say we should do a live roundtable playing the game.
Sounds good.
I mean, have y'all talk about it one night, then one night just do like maybe a Patreon thing where we all get on and just play it, do a session or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick too, before we get off here. I tried to find the video of that mini drone that was the assassin thing.
Mhm.
It actually looks like it was speculative fiction, not a real thing.
Oh, okay.
From 7 years ago, but
I'm sure
yeah.
it could be a real thing.
that's
the thing.
some like at this point it could be real.
Well, one of real quick, one of the interviews we've conducted on the Daily Grail is with this guy, Blair Mackenzie Blake, the moderator of the Tool Band website. And he once visited Area 51, and he had interactions with what seemed to be insect-sized drones,
Wow.
and that was in the 1990s, man.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Where can people find you, Saxon?
I'm on Instagram under Super Inframan, and I've started a Blue Sky account, and so I'm Super Inframan there as well.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Strive.
Gracias.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. I can't do this without you, so thank you for supporting the show. And know that every positive thing that comes out of this show is partially because of you. I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons who are pledging $10 or more a month. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Marthartha, Midnight Review presents Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Gaia-Quinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Billuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Corey Nelson, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Jonathan Frost, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Shurek, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda from Michigan, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Shoemaker, Mark Brady, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sasha McHale, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varush K., Victoria, Vincent Treewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Colin Karras, Craig Sagastumi, and Matthew Brown. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. There is a Patreon segment to go along with this. It is just Saxon and I on that. It's pretty lengthy, and it kind of goes all over the place, which is exactly what you should expect from this show. So, yeah, there's that. And if you're a patron, you'll get that very, very soon. And if you're not a patron, it's only $3 a month, and it helps out the show greatly. And I want to welcome a few new patrons this week. Becky Krusper, Arnie Buzzell, and Liz and Olivia Emmons. Thanks for joining up. I hope you enjoy the new content, the extra content, the additional content, the early shows, all that stuff. You can also watch the documentary Chris Ernst made about this show and myself as a Patreon for free. You can also just go to the Patreon page, and for $5 you can just watch it. That's right at the top of the page now, so people can access that easily if you don't want to join up, but you'd like to see the documentary. Also, I host a metal show, sort of. I mean, it's metal with a lot of other stuff mixed in, but it's not like other metal shows. If you want to check that out, it's called The Last Exit for the Lost, and it's at thelastexit.org. And actually, Marty Garza, who did the first part of this conversation with me, co-hosted a couple of weeks ago. That's up on the page if you want to check out his picks of music, which are very different from my picks of music. But yeah, all the shows are up there in an archive on Mixcloud, so you can listen anytime. If you want to hear some stuff you're not going to hear elsewhere, that's the best place to go, because I have things that nobody else has, and we do live performances, and we talk about movies and stuff in between. And Marty told some cool stories about his time with monster trucks. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.